Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education. We are going to talk AI a little bit today. We've been doing this more and more because, well, AI is changing daily, so we need to keep up. And I've been looking forward to this one. I discovered AI for Education on LinkedIn, and it was so exciting to see their prompt library because I shared this with teachers, and it was almost like I was back in the 90s showcasing what the internet could do. And now with that, like those wide eyes I was getting for teachers is the same thing. With this, I mean, it's just so exciting. And the prompts, one teacher said, it took me forever to create Bloom's questions. And now it's all right here for me, not only creating them in AI, but the prompts and how to do it. So today I'm looking forward to hearing all about AI for Education, their work that they do, and get some tips perhaps on using AI. Jerry, are you excited too?
Oh, I am really excited. And I wanted to know, where do we find this prompt library? Can you tell us that?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I'll say hi. Hi, everyone. I'm
Yes.
Amanda. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AI for Education. The prompt I we were just talking about is almost a year old. It'll be a year old on April 17th, which is wild. And so if you're new to AI, when we say prompt, what we mean is the way that you interact through natural language, that's right, writing questions, to a conversational generative AI tool like ChatGPT, or if you like Claude or you're a Gemini person. And so what we did is it's actually quite a funny story. You can find it at our website, which is just aiforeducation.io. But I started AI for Education really after the very first prompt I ever used. And so I'm a former teacher. I also have worked in all kinds of different jobs. And I had a job out of grad school where we built 200 courses in 20 months. And I was the only education person on the staff the entire
Wow.
time. I know. And each of those courses had 3 rubrics. So we're talking 600
Right.
rubrics in 20 months. And if you've heard me talk about it before, I'm still a broken human being.
Oh,
So much so that the first time I ever used ChatGPT, I didn't ask it for like a trip idea or a lesson plan. I asked it for a rubric, and I had not written a rubric in a decade. So this is how
With
much I've
TSM.
yeah, like I do. Like I still, and I guess I was just really looking at a place in which there is we need rubrics. They're really important. They
Right.
guide learning and
Right.
they allow for students to know what they're going to be assessed on. But we so rarely have time to do them. But then secondly, even when we do have time, we kind of don't do them that well. Like
Yeah.
whether they're typos or formatting, or we're not thinking about the criteria. So when I used a very simple prompt, which have definitely gotten more sophisticated since then, and asked ChatGPT to build me a rubric, and when it automatically did a great rubric, but formatted it as a chart, I was done. I was like, this is it, right? I cannot believe that this is something that would take me 45 minutes to do, and I would probably mess it up. And so that is like when we talk about that moment, that prompt, that question is what we did. And what's hysterical is that when I launched the website, I realized this months later, but we're in such a fascinating time, is that I think I had heard about prompt libraries and maybe seen 1 or 2, but I definitely didn't pay any attention to that. What I did instead was, okay, brand new time. Let's build a tool like a library that's very pedagogically sound, that's as much about learning how to prompt as it is a productivity tool. And so
Yeah.
it's actually really school friendly because it has an example that you can make your own. There's one that if you are not comfortable, you can just cut and paste it. So I have
Right.
teachers that are like, I can't even find ChatGPT. So what we don't want to give them a lot of like a very high barrier to see the value. So you just cut and paste it. But then the best part is that it's like prompt versus prompting. A single
Mm,
prompt is not going to get you what you want usually. But if you're
right.
willing to give a little bit of resilience and keep prompting, give feedback, you're going to see some amazing things. And so we actually give tips on how do you take that rubric and now make it tip sheets or a checklist, build a student exemplars, the things that we would never really do because we didn't have time or the avenue to do it. And so that's how the prompt library was designed. And now it's wild. We have 100 prompts. We just did an update last week, or this week, actually. I finished it on Sunday. And it's been viewed over 200,000 times completely organically.
Incredible.
Since essentially, I would say we launched in April, but people didn't know about it till about June. So it's less than a year. We're probably going to be at about 500,000 with it by the start of the next school year, which is pretty fascinating and amazing.
That is
That's
fascinating and
incredible.
amazing. And So teachers just find out about you organically?
Yeah, so Jamie is a great example. Jamie has been
There
such
we go.
a lovely addition to my life and you know, my community of
Yes.
colleagues. And really what happened is, I'm not a big social media person, which is really funny because if you know me now, you're like, "Oh, Amanda loves LinkedIn." Amanda does not love LinkedIn and will stop talking about herself in third person. But what happened is, like, I actually hadn't posted on LinkedIn for almost a year. I used it a little bit in Australia, where I was the CEO of an EdTech company there. We did some research. So I had about 2,000 followers, but I don't like that kind of work. But what I found is that there was this huge lack of discussion about practical applications of generative AI
Right.
last April. Like, to the point that, like, I still actually think we're kind of lacking that practical knowledge still. And so I
Hmm.
just started posting, and it just kind of people started listening and started reaching out. And then we did a webinar series. I'm such a crazy person. We had 12 people on our mailing list. If you ever want to start something, everyone, we had 12 people on our mailing list on June 1st. And I was like, it'd be great. Let's do a webinar series every Wednesday through the summer, and we'll see what happens. So 12 people on June 1st. By the end of the webinar series that actually kept going through the end of the year, we had reached over 15,000 educators through our
Yeah, oh,
webinars.
wow. Wow,
And
incredible.
like, I know, wild, right? And so through those pieces and our prompt library always being free, it has been absolutely, I think
Mhm.
we've been to one conference that we had a table at, and we have spent probably about like $2,500 on marketing across the whole time. And that's all. And now we have, like a 85,000 visits to our website a month now. And gosh, guys, I have like almost 23,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is insane to me.
That is totally insane. And it is crazy that you don't like LinkedIn because even your posts are so great. I mean, they're thorough, you tag everything, and then there's always the great graphics that your partner in
Yeah, yeah. So good.
Dan creates those using Canva, which we're Canva stands, so we
Yes.
love that. So yeah, I mean, it's just really just a gift, number one. So thank you. It's really fabulous. And when you go to conferences and you do keynotes and you speak, on virtual events, what are you finding are some of the gaps? What are you finding that schools are still needing to do? Or, I mean, we don't need to be prompt engineers, right? We just need to know how to do, and I like how you differentiated between, creating a prompt and prompting, right? Because we need to dialogue in order to get where we need to be. But um, how do you, what are you seeing when you're talking to educators?
So first of all, I think there's this like if you are only on LinkedIn or social media and you go to all the conferences, you're going to be like everyone is a prompt engineer. The
Right.
differences between the different types of AI and like that's just not the case. And that I don't think that's not only just the case in education, but I think that is a worldwide question right now.
Mhm.
What we see is that we're still in a very early adopter innovator space where I would say in schools we have anywhere between 2 and 15% of educators are really adopting these tools meaningfully. And then we have a whole bunch of group of like not that, whether that is at the other end, which is fear-based and or really
Mhm.
like actively thinking this is going to really negatively impact student learning. And then we have a whole bunch of middle, which is like, I'm really busy. This is another thing. It's going to go away. Someone's going to figure it out. I'll get to it later. That are kind of sitting in this middle space. And maybe they used ChatGPT once or 5 times and maybe didn't find that much value. Because one of the things that's really interesting is that these tools are actually not that intuitive. If you think about what we do that is technological every day, it's like search Google. And searching Google, you can be a good Googler, right? Where you know the right search terms and you can kind of figure it out. But realistically, that is not a high bar of technical use, where these conversational AIs really do require a knowledge of what they are and what they aren't, but also how do we like end up knowing how to ask the right question in the right way? So what I see is that first of all, is there is a general need for generative AI literacy across the ecosystem. And so that's a lot of like, so I would say that the majority of the people that we work with will come to us from that level.
Yes.
How do we start training our teachers? How do we start demystifying this? How do we try to find a place of value for them? Because we genuinely want to make teaching easier and school better for kids and teachers. So that's what I will say that more and more now, though, we are seeing people understanding the need for guidelines the needs for embedded practice, the needs for more than just a one-shot, Amanda and the team's going to come in, demystify it, but where do we go next? And so I think
Right.
that if you're whatever part of the world you're in, whether you're an educator, a leader, a student, or building your own technology, really is an important moment that we often think about this idea that you're either too early or too late for technological adoption. We are still in the early
Mhm.
stages. These technologies are still very inconsistent, unreliable, and potentially harmful. And that so
Mhm.
we don't have to go all in. There's not this thing where I could go in and say, here are the 5 tools, Jamie. And Jerri, this is the 3 things you have to do. And then it's going to be like a fix. Instead, this is going to require us to start learning about what generative AI is and can do, but also how we can start applying this in meaningful ways. So that's what we really see. And so whatever stage you're on, wherever you are in your own, like if you're listening, you're at the right stage. But what we say is like start to adopt, start to, be, if you can, be curious, experiment, learn a bit. And or if you're ready to start bringing like more structure and intentional adoption of these tools within your ecosystem.
And I know of a school recently that shut it down for students on their Chromebooks, like just banned it. And
Yes.
so that was kind of like stepping back. And I think the reasoning, I thought, oh no, at first, because that place of fear isn't so great either. Because then you have the inequities, you have the AI haves, the AI have nots, and we don't want that. But then it made me think just about what you're saying. Like maybe they're not ready at this point. I think what was happening was students were using tools that were not COPA compliant. They were
Yes.
putting in PII, the personally identifiable information, which they shouldn't be doing. So they realized we got to take a step back and we have to train teachers better. We have to train students on, we do digital citizenship and maybe we just do it in the computer class, but maybe now we need to think about AI literacy in terms of the entire uh, district, right? Make sure that everyone's getting it and really honing in on that and the dangers and the benefits and how we can leverage it. I mean, so is that like a decent approach for people to actually step back and really get your AI policy in place and AI literacy in place?
Yeah, no, I think so. And what 2 things. One is that when we think about like teaching about a fundamental skill like literacy, like so we say like computational thinking, computer, like media literacy, we've talked about, of course, like literacy and fluency with reading and writing. These are really big, heady, long term, like it doesn't, you can't just do it. What's
Right.
fascinating though is that you can very quickly, let's say 90 minutes, give me 90 minutes, give yourself 90 minutes with someone that a good partner to help you demystify what this is and isn't,
Mhm.
contextualize it in the fact that this is not something that just happened yesterday, but has been around since the 50s that we've been moving
Right.
towards, and it has sped up. And that finding like how to use it and using it. So show, not tell. This is not the time that you talk about it, just show it. But
That.
we tend to bury people in words in policy when we're not sure about something.
Yeah.
And we tend to bury people in tools around technology when we aren't sure what it is. So I'm not suggesting either of those things. I think simplicity is best. But if we can do that, that is that's generative AI literacy. Like media literacy, like it takes a long time. They define, maybe it's not that interesting for students, but give a student a modeling of a chatbot or doing it at they're age appropriate and they have support with the right training. They are immediately going to see things like inaccuracies, like hallucinations.
Right.
They're
Right.
potentially see bias. They're going to see that it can't follow a thread because it's not actually thinking. And so maybe I shouldn't wholesale trust these tools, and I need to be a critical user. That's not like the
Yeah.
same thing as seeing 2 websites and try no offense to media literacy everywhere, it's so important. But I think you could Trojan horse media literacy and digital literacy through the use of
Yeah.
generative literacy. So that's one. For
Right.
policies, I think we have gotten into this mindset that policy has to happen. We think that guidelines and guidance needs to happen. And these guidelines need to be simple and direct and easy to understand.
Mhm.
And they also should be about mindsets of use. Yes. And if you
Yeah.
can build
Really.
mindsets of use around transparency, we talk about transparency of use, talk verification of outputs.
Mhm.
No, ChatGPT told you so. And the last
Mhm.
thing is we talk about level of originality or augmentation. And if you can think about those things, you start to build mindsets not just for students, but also for teachers. And so I think that that's where we get really excited about that. This is not like, oh, it's again crazy. June of last year, we had our first school. Shout out Thomas A. Edison Career and Technical School in the Queens. Moses Aheda is the principal. I built still very early stages, kind of just me, built a presentation on Intro to Generative AI. That presentation has only changed 10% in almost a
Wow.
year. I know,
Wow.
and
That's
it's kind
interesting.
of gotten a little bit more. We've added a couple more prompts and a couple other things, but realistically, it's almost exactly the same because the fundamentals at this moment in time, that's not what's changing so quickly. What's changing so quickly is the different models and
Yes.
which is the best and what's out and like this new tool.
Right. Tools.
Realistically, the AI hasn't changed. These
Right.
technologies have, greatly changed, and the way to use them also hasn't greatly changed yet. So I think that maybe gives people a little bit of like comfort that
Oh,
we're able to keep that stable. It isn't as wild, wild west in the foundational component as we think it is.
Right. And I'm at
point.
the state commissioners meeting, and one of the things
Mm,
they're saying is exactly what you're saying. Slow the roll. Make sure that you're thinking about the human aspect, the what I call the character education aspect of all of this. Make sure that all of that is solid and in place, and then start looking at the shiny new tools and how you can use them before you move forward, which I think is so true. And I do think, and I don't know, are you finding that really writing the prompts is critical thinking, using your thinking
mm.
skills and
Yeah.
thinking strategically? So it's really not anything new. It's those basic things that we've always been talking about. We're just putting them to use in a different way.
Yeah, and we think of it as like three things. Like I talk about it. It's like your creativity, like how creative can you get?
Yes.
The resilience, because it's probably like again, one prompt isn't gonna cut it. Like
Right.
it's gonna be
Right.
weird or inconsistent. It doesn't have any pedagogical knowledge, doesn't have any knowledge really of anything. It's this really interesting, next word predictor that has some amazing capabilities. But the third thing is a little bit of prompting technique. And so for
Yes.
example, not better Google, everybody. It is not Google, not better Google.
Yeah.
In fact, if you are using the free version of ChatGPT or Claude, you are not connected to the internet, everyone. And that blows people's minds. That is
Right.
not connected to the internet at all. It could give you a URL and it will be a made up URL. So the idea of a little bit of prompting
Mm.
knowledge, the sense of how do I ask questions? How do I frame things in a way that's logical and consistent? How do I start to learn things like Jamie were talking before this, like what's a really good tip for people to get started? A large language model is large and it's going to be trained on the internet. And so if I have a question that's specifically about special education, social emotional learning, lesson planning, what I can do, which is an evidence-based research fact piece, is I can give the first sentence in my first prompt in that context window. You are an expert instructional designer and teacher with experience with the Castle framework. Or you're an expert nutritionist and meal planner that creates amazing, affordable dishes, or you are a expert special educator. And the reason why we do that is that tends to cut the context down, that large language model, because you're giving it that context in that context window, and your outcomes are going to be better and more targeted more quickly.
Isn't it also good to put it first too, to set that stage? So not later, but first. Does that
We
make a
suggest
difference?
that, yeah. So it does, because we don't want you to do is keep doing that every way, because the context window, the way these technologies work is that they have all this training and all this, the model has been developed, and then it's bringing its, knowledge, so to speak. It's bringing its next word predictor ability with your context in that context window.
Oh,
So if I set out that context window, that's how it's going to remember me.
mm,
ChatGPT is releasing something that there'll be memory, and if you can't see me in quotation marks across, but realistically, that window up to a certain number of tokens or words, parts of words, are going to remember that conversation. So if I start the conversation from a position of priming that, like who you are, who they are, then it helps all the way down. It isn't something you keep having to add though, right? Like you don't have to put it into every prompt, but it's a really good way to start. And then what you can do, there's all kinds of different types of prompting techniques, but you can do something like a skeleton of thought where you give it like, I want to build a lesson plan. Here's
mhm.
what I want. I'm going to start with objectives. Help me build objectives. I choose the objective. Okay, now the objectives are started. Now I'm going to identify the key vocabulary. And what you can do is you can go down, you can either ask it for that all at the top, which we call a one-shot prompt, or you can go, here's what I want. let's build. And then I feel like that way, it's like exactly scaffolding. Like I'm going to go, here's this part, and this part. And things like that actually tend to have a higher degree of output, right? Of quality. Takes a little bit more effort. But if you're getting to your level of expertise, you will see that better. And an anecdote that I have is that I had a teacher at a district last week who had been trying to use ChatGPT to build a project idea for his students around the New Deal. And he built something, it wasn't great. And so his reaction was, the tool isn't great. And I had to be like, okay, like there's most likely something about the way you're prompting. So we used we have a research project prompt, like picked ideas. He used the prompt and he's like, oh man, he's like, "This is much better." And like, and he learned from that moment of what he wasn't not doing. He was over relying on what he thought the technology could do. So he wasn't using specific context. He wasn't giving details, formatting, needs, etc. But he was like, he's like, it's too late for me to do it this semester, but now I feel really confident using this prompt or the techniques to do this better the next time.
Yeah, I definitely see a difference when I chunk it like that and I scaffold what I'm asking it. And it also helps me to formulate really what I'm looking for, because a lot of times you're not sure. You think you know what you want, but then you realize there's more to it. So that's why I like to kind of take it in steps. I really like that. I was just on a panel on AI, and that's what I kind of talked about was, you know, kind of stepping back and looking at what it is that how people are prepared, and making sure that you're choosing safe tools and not definitely explore and experiment, but then make sure that what you're using is what you need it for and the quality. But then also looking at, we talk about silver linings a lot, looking at, well, perhaps we're going to be getting back to making sure that at the center is instructional best practices, and making sure that, yeah, we can use this, but you, at the heart of it, you want to make sure that those instructional best practices are in place. And actually what you're getting also is, because for teachers using it, you have that efficiency, you have that productivity, you have time back. So hopefully you can put that back to the heart of teaching, with conferencing with kids, with getting quality formative assessment by actually dialoguing with students and getting that time back. And so and all of those other wonderful best practices of instructional strategies. So, that I think is important too, and making sure that there's a blend and not just kind of throwing the tool out.
I've heard a couple rumors. Number one, if you're kind to ChatGPT and say
Oh, I
please
always
and
am.
thank you, does that help? And the other one, if you offer to tip it, it's supposed to give you a
No.
better experience.
First of all, what's a really, really the really interesting one. The first thing is that there's a big set of research, which is why we updated our prompt library. And one of the most important things was the prime example I gave you. They found no distinct difference if you said please or thank you or were polite. So that one's a no. That one doesn't
I
matter.
do that anyway, just because I
Just
feel
good
comfortable
manners.
doing it.
I mean, that's totally okay though. I mean, like
Right.
we have our different vibe, and I definitely am in front of people and like would do that. Like that's fine. Like, but the second thing is that there are some really interesting things. Number one is someone did go, they put in like, I'll give you a tip of $200 if you do this well. And that worked. It worked so well that it was actually in a system prompt. Take this with a 99% accuracy. I'm pretty sure the system prompt that was updated after the holidays because ChatGPT got a little bit lazy.
Yes.
And they thought, oh, why? So the systems prompt so if you understand like the way these tools work is that the system prompt's actually written essentially in English, and it gives the chatbot like ChatGPT or Gemini rules of engagement, tells them the date. So they thought like, okay, started getting lazy. It wasn't giving full code output, et cetera. And maybe it's because the tool understood that in December, people take a break. And so what they did is they updated the system prompt and said, your users have no hands. You have to do all the Python. We'll give you a tip of $200. And so it's really interesting. So emotional plays, like this is important for my job. Even something that's like, you have to, do this well or else kind of stuff. It actually does help. There's also like the grandma technique that I think there's a jailbreak that you could use, like like to explain it to my grandma, or it's important for her to get it to do things that were inappropriate. That I think has been patched. Don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure that's been. But I think that these tools, because they are trained on like the internet and a lot of that has human interactions and norms, is that some of them do actually have an impact on the quality. I will say though, if you're using the free chatbots, they like ChatGPT 3.5, it doesn't matter as much. And in fact, like even something like a chain of a skeleton of thought is less effective than on the frontier models, which are ChatGPT 4, now Claude 3, and as well as Gemini Advanced. Those ones, those kind of tipping, emotional pleas, et cetera, tend to have more of an impact on those frontier models.
Interesting. I love that. Now, ChatGPT 5 is going to be coming out in August, I think I read. And from what they say, it's like completely like different and high level. And,
Take a
you're
grain of
fine.
grain of salt. I mean, Sam Altman was on, Lex Fridman. I think we have a little bit of time, right, to understand there. What's really interesting is ChatGPT 4 up until the last month, essentially. You could say Gemini, like Advanced was in December, but was launched in January, are the first GPT-4 class models that were not GPT-4. So it took about a year for everyone to catch up. But now there are multiple on par, on parity, or slightly better frontier models, GPT-4 class models. And the thing that's interesting is that like Gemini is a multimodal model. It's been trained on not just text, image, and video, but it also can output text and image at the same time. So it's like there's some changes that are happening. So I think what we're going to see is that definitely like OpenAI is going to is going to have to get ahead again. And so what I hope is that GPT-4 becomes a free version because equity is so important and
Sure.
they
Yeah.
have such a better model that I hope that they don't just keep 3.5. The good news is that Gemini at Google, the free version, and Claude's free version are better than 3.5, or at least Claude is, right? So I think I'm hopeful that the free versions, the equity accessible versions will get better. I would say GPT-5, let's see, sometime this year, definitely. It might not even be called GPT-5, but it
Right.
will still be a generative model. We've not reached the ultimate goal of these companies is to reach artificial general intelligence or super intelligence. There has not been that breakthrough yet. We're still going to be talking about classes of generative models.
Well, I have a question
Gotcha.
for you for listeners that are not really familiar with this. How do I get to Claude 3 and how would I get to Gemini? Because I think Chat GPT is kind of easy to find, but the other two might not be as easy.
Okay, so two other ones. So OpenAI and ChatGPT, you probably have heard about it. In fact, a lot of tools that you use that are going to be EdTech tools probably are built on the API or like they have that underneath. That's the power. Gemini is now Google. So if you have Google, like Google Gemini, search it in, you have to sign up, but that gives you access to the free version. They have an advanced version. All of them have like $20 per month.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then Claude, though, CLAUDE .ai is a fascinating case. So Claude was started by people that were at OpenAI that left in 2019 to build a more ethical AI. So take that with what you want to take with it. And so the two, like Dario and Daniela Armado, Amida, I probably said their last name wrong, our brother and sister, they left with the group and they built Claude, which is a constitutional AI. It's trying to be designed to be more ethical. And they released literally 2 weeks ago their 3 new models. One of them's free and the other one's $20. That if you want to talk about writing, the natural writing ability of like the fact that it feels natural, not that it's natural in the sense of, human thinking,
Sure.
is phenomenal. And it was already good. And now it's gotten much, much better. So if you are thinking about, like, for example, we had this playbook that we're going to be, like, we kind of took everything we learned from the first year. We're creating this implementation, Gen AI implementation playbook. And I wrote something that was trying to make a relatively technical explanation a little bit easier. And I went to Claude and I had it give me feedback. And it was so targeted and so thoughtful. And I didn't actually use any of the wording, but like I understood what I needed to change and what was a
Oh,
misconception. And I think that that's where we're gonna start to see, like, you don't have what I'm saying right now is you don't have to be an expert on 3. If you find one conversational AI that you really, really like and
Mm-hmm.
you have a little bit of money, it's worth paying for the upgraded
$20.
version.
Yes.
Yeah. But if not, just, like, what I'd say is use one, get comfortable with it, and find the
right.
value, and that's just enough.
How do you keep up with all of this?
Well, we have our keynote. We have a little girl that's getting, like, sprayed in the face by a hose. So have you
Yes.
seen my keynotes before? And so the pace of change is this pace of change. It's very fast. I am a huge nerd, everybody. I know you can't tell because I definitely don't sound nerdy, but no, I actually love learning about this. I've been an EdTech C. I've built technology with my team. I've been a researcher and I'm a researcher. I've been a teacher. So I come from that, but I'm also just very lucky that I kind of just really vibe with it and understand it and
Yes.
like it. But I spend about an hour a day usually
Yeah.
reading papers, keeping up to date. But I will say, and like I'm very lucky. I have a pretty good memory, and I can like things the way I think is like little building blocks. And the more blocks I have, the better off I am. But for like my team that also are doing all this work, we've decided that we're actually going to put in place like a biweekly kind of conversation where we're going to come together and share research and best practice and
Love
learning
that.
so that we're continuing to build that because it is moving so quickly. Jamie is in our Women in AI Education group now. She got pulled over because of our summit we're putting together. If you guys want to hang out on April 27th, we're going to have a virtual summit for AI in education. But we share research and articles daily. Like people are sharing, all kinds of cool stuff. And if
Yes.
you really are nerdy, you can get into it, or you can just start to see what the headlines are. And I think that, we don't want it to feel overwhelming, but I think that if you are interested, kind of follow the people that matter, whether it's,
Right.
I like Ethan Malik is great. He's a Wharton Business School and he does some really great, he's really wonky. Like he really likes to research and that makes me happy because I'm like, oh man, just give me more research.
Yes.
Or you can follow people that are more applied and that have
Sure.
maybe the view, classroom, special education, etc.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the best place
Yeah.
to follow you is LinkedIn.
So LinkedIn definitely we are committed to LinkedIn. So 4 to 5 days a week, y'all. It is a lot. We have our Women in AI Education community, so you can find that on our website. And then we are, for us, our website and our newsletter. So we send a newsletter about every 2 weeks that has, what we've been producing, but also key news and resources. So AIforeducation.io, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Where
Love it.
I-
Love
if
it.
you
Really
ever want
great.
to ghostwrite my LinkedIn, everybody, if anybody, I'll take a day off. One of you,
Yeah,
Dana and I
right?
Well, you
if
can
anybody
have
wants.
Chat GPT write that for you.
I do,
That's
it's
true.
very funny. I've never used ChatGPT to write.
That is ironic,
That
actually.
is.
We are a fascinating group. We do use generative AI, but because we are building something that's never been built before, these tools are not great for that. And so
Yeah.
we're really like producing stuff. And so like to go for new ideas and other things, but I've used it for like PD and ideas for those types of things,
Right.
but we do not use it to ghostwrite at this stage.
Ah,
That's great. That's so
yes.
great. But again, I think, and you gave a perfect example when people worry about, there are some teachers who have that horror, right? They're fearful of the lack of critical thinking of students. They're fearful of cheating and plagiarism. But what you described earlier is a perfect example of how students can use it critically. You write your ideas, you put it in, and you ask for feedback. And then you get that reasoning back. And you said you didn't even use, like, they gave you suggestions but you really put into play some of the feedback that it was giving. And it gave you so
It was great.
that is a perfect example of how it can be used in the classroom and how it's an extra set of hands for getting that formative, check in. When you can't be with a student at that time, you're working with another, but at
Sure.
least they have another peer to work with. So there's so many different layers and ways that we can use this. And it just, you mentioned it before, bringing in those human skills that we want to still keep and strengthen and sharpen to coexist with this machine, learning world that we're in. We're in it. And it's not
We're
going
in it.
anywhere.
We are.
I just want to mention we're in it. We are in it. And I want to mention the summit again. So Amanda
Yes.
mentioned it's coming up on April 27th. It's an all-day global event and hoping to do more. So if anyone's watching this after April 27th, 2024, then there's going to be more probably, right?
That's great.
Yeah, we're really excited. And Jamie's been Jamie actually is the engine for this because there are some things that we've had ideas for over 6 months, like the Promptathon, for example, which is where we bring students and teachers together to solve community problems with generative AI. But
Yeah, we didn't
Jamie
mention that. I love that.
and Jamie's like, we're going to make this happen. And she like literally put it out there. We have 7 amazing volunteers,
Amazing.
all
So many.
ladies, and we're going to have this
Fantastic.
learning, experimenting, and innovating together, and we're really excited. But I want to say thank you to Jamie because it would not have happened if she had not said,
No.
you're doing it.
She's
So
a
I do appreciate you.
powerhouse. She is a powerhouse.
Get it done. Get it done. Get it out of the head and out in the universe. So
Yes.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. But Amanda, thank you. There's so much more to talk about. We're going to have you on. So great to learn from you. So thank you for taking the time. And we're actually going to another meeting together after this. Wow.
With me, Jerri, and everyone, just like the thing I've been stopping with now is just experiment, try it out, be a bit weird, have a little bit of fun, find some value for yourself. The other stuff will come after.
Love it.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Good advice.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube.